The respiratory system is vital for human survival, enabling the exchange of gases crucial for cellular function. Comprising the lungs, airways, and respiratory muscles, it plays a pivotal role in oxygen intake and carbon dioxide expulsion. This report explores the anatomy, physiology, and common disorders of the respiratory system, emphasizing the importance of respiratory health and ongoing advancement in treatment and management. But before we start our discussion, let's take a look at the contents of our topic, the respiratory system. It includes the definition of respiratory system, the function of respiratory system, anatomy of respiratory system, physiology of respiratory system, Heimlich maneuver, and lastly, the problems of respiratory system. First is the definition of the respiratory system. Respiratory system consists of the nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and lungs. The primary function of this system is to furnish oxygen for individual tissue cells and to take away the waste products and carbon dioxide produced by the same cells. When the respiratory system is mentioned, people generally think of breathing, but breathing is only one of the activities of the respiratory system. The body cells need a continuous supply of oxygen for the metabolic processes that are necessary to maintain life. The respiratory system consists of two respiration, the external respiration and internal respiration. The external respiration is the process of inhaling oxygen into the lungs and exhaling carbon dioxide. That process includes the ventilation of the lungs and the exchange of air in the lungs and blood within the capillaries of the alveoli of the lungs. While internal respiration is the metabolic process by which living cells use blood flowing through the capillaries, absorbing the oxygen they need and releasing the carbon dioxide they create. Respiration is the sequence of events that results in the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the atmosphere and the body cells. Nerve impulses stimulate the breathing process or ventilation, which moves air through a series of passages into and out of the lungs. After this, there is an exchange of gases between the lungs and the blood. This is called external respiration. The blood transports the gases to and from the tissue cells. The exchange of gases between the blood and tissue cells is internal respiration. Let us bound to the function of the respiratory system. The function of the respiratory system. The air we breathe contains oxygen and other gases. The respiratory system's main job is to move fresh air into your body while removing waste gases. And also, there are five functions of the respiratory system, and these are respiratory system is the air distributor, gas exchanger, filters, warms and humidifies air, influences speech, and allows for sense of smell.
Anatomy of respiratory system. Respiratory system is divided into two, the upper respiratory tract and lower respiratory tract.
Upper respiratory tract. The major passages and structures of the upper respiratory tract include the nose or nostrils, nasal cavity, throat or pharynx, and sinuses. The respiratory system is lined with a mucous membrane that secretes mucus. The mucus traps smaller particles like pollen or smoke. Hair-like structures called cilia line the mucous membrane and move the particle trapped in the mucus out of the nose. Inhaled air is moistened, warmed, and cleansed by the tissue that lines the nasal cavity. The nose. The external opening of the nose is the nostrils or anterior nares. The dividing partition between the nostrils is the nasal septum, which forms two nasal cavities. Each cavity is divided into three air passages: the superior, middle, and inferior canchi. The conky passages lead to the passageway called the pharynx. Here, the ear is connected to the sinuses, the ears through the eustachian tubes, and even the eyes through the nasolacrimal ducts. The palatine or palate bones and maxilla upper jaw bone separate the nasal cavities from the mouth cavity. Cilia or hairs line the mucous membrane. About one quarter of mucus is produced daily. Inhaled air is moistened, warmed, and cleansed by the tissue that lines the nasal cavity. Palatine bone separates nasal cavity from mouth. Cleft palate occurs when palatine bone does not form correctly, which results in difficulty in swallowing and speaking. Septum separates right and left nostrils. Rich blood supply will result in nosebleeds. Sinuses are air-filled spaces in the skull. They are located behind the forehead, nasal bones, cheeks, and eyes. The nose has five functions. First, it serves as an air passageway. Second, it warms and moistens inhaled air. Third, its cilia or hair and mucous membrane trap dust, pollen, bacteria, and foreign matter. Fourth, it contains olfactory receptors which smell odors. And last, it aids in phonation and the quality of voice. The pharynx. The pharynx is the correct term for the throat. It is a muscular and membranous tube that is about 5 inches long. Extending downward from the base of the skull, it eventually becomes the esophagus. The nasopharynx is behind the nose, the oropharynx is behind the mouth, the laryngopharynx is behind the larynx. These are the three divisions. First is the nasopharynx. It is behind the nose, the soft palate. Second is the oropharynx, behind the mouth, soft palate to hyoid bone. Third is the laryngopharynx, hyoid bone to the esophagus.
Let's proceed with the lower respiratory tract. The organs making up the lower respiratory tract are all protected and kept in a place by the rib cage and the sternum. This includes larynx, trachea, bronchial tree, and lungs. Larynx, are commonly known as the voice box, is a structure in the throat involved in breathing, sound production, and protecting the trachea. It houses the vocal cords, which are essential for speech. The larynx sits at the top of the trachea, or what we call windpipe, and is composed of cartilage, muscles, and mucous membranes. Larynx contains vocal cords which produce sound. Short, tense vocal cords produce high notes, while the long, relaxed vocal cords produce low notes. As what we can see in this photo, we have several types of cartilage structures of the larynx. Thyroid cartilage, or Adam's apple, is usually larger in male, allowing longer vocal cords and contributing to a deeper male voice. Epiglottis covers the entrance of the larynx while swallowing to avoid choking, and cricoid cartilage contains the vocal cords. The thyroid cartilage is the largest cartilage of the larynx, commonly referred to as the Adam's apple. Epiglottis is a flap-like structure that covers the opening of the larynx during swallowing and speaking. So overall, it plays a crucial role in both communication and protection of the respiratory system, making it an essential structure in the human body. Trachea is also known as the windpipe. It is a vital part of the respiratory system in humans. It is a tubular structure that connects the larynx to the bronchi, which leads into the lungs. Trachea is composed of a series of C-shaped rings of cartilage stacked on top of each other, and these rings provide support and prevent the trachea from collapsing while still allowing flexibility for movement and expansion of the adjacent structures. Trachea is located in front of the esophagus in the neck and upper chest region. When you inhale, air enters the trachea, traveling from the nose or mouth down through the larynx and into the trachea. From there, it continues into the bronchi and eventually reaches the lungs. Tracheostomy is the cutting of an opening in trachea to allow breathing. So overall, trachea serves a critical role in the respiratory system by facilitating the passage of air to and from the lungs and helping to protect the lungs from harmful particles and irritants. Bronchial tree is the branching system of airways in the respiratory tract that conducts air from the trachea into the lungs. It consists of series of increasingly smaller air passages that eventually lead to the alveoli, the tiny air sacs where gas exchange occurs. The left bronchi is smaller than the right bronchi because room is needed to accommodate the heart. If a foreign body is inhaled or drawn by suction, it usually lodges in the larger right bronchi or enters the right lung. In the presence of infection, the bronchi sometimes can become inflamed, resulting in a diagnosis of bronchitis. The main components of the bronchial tree are trachea, which is the main airway that extends from the larynx to the bronchi. Primary bronchi are the first divisions of the trachea that enter each lung. Each primary bronchus further divides into secondary bronchi, or also known as lobar bronchi, which supplies air to each lobe of the lungs. The secondary bronchi continues to divide into smaller bronchi, known as the tertiary bronchi or segmental bronchi. These supplies air into smaller divisions of the lung called bronchopulmonary segments. The tertiary bronchi further divide into smaller bronchioles, which lack cartilage rings and have smooth muscle in their walls. Bronchioles continue to branch into smaller and smaller tubes called terminal bronchioles. These are the smallest airways in the bronchial tree that are still conducting air. They mark the end of the conducting zone of the respiratory system and lead to the respiratory zone, where gas exchange occurs. Terminal bronchioles transition into respiratory bronchioles, which contain some alveoli in their walls. This marks the beginning of the respiratory zone of the lung. Respiratory bronchioles lead into alveolar ducts, which are lined with alveoli, and alveoli are the tiny air sacs where the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs between the air and the blood. Bronchial tree plays a crucial role in the respiratory system by conducting air to and from the lungs and facilitating gas exchange in the alveoli. As what you can